My parents called it a family meeting. They said it casually, the way you'd say, let's grab lunch, no agenda, no warning, just a Sunday afternoon summons to the house I grew up in. My mother even used the word cozy. It'll be cozy, she said. I'll make that chicken soup you love. I knew better. In 32 years of being Linda Marsh's eldest daughter, I had never once sat down to a cozy family meeting. Every single one had been an ambush, dressed up in chicken soup and good intentions. But I went anyway, because I am, as my therapist now tells me, a recovering people pleaser with an impressive pain threshold. What my parents didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 3 weeks earlier, I had opened a credit card statement addressed to me for an account I had never opened. The balance was $11,400. The purchases included a weekend at a resort in Scottsdale, 2 first-class flights, a designer handbag, and what appeared to be a 4-month gym membership to a studio that charged $300 a month. Someone had been living very well on my name, and I had spent those 3 weeks quietly, methodically, building a case that would have made my former corporate law clients proud. I hadn't said a word. I had just watched and waited and kept every document in a manila folder at the bottom of my work bag. So when my mother set the soup in front of me and my father folded his hands on the kitchen table like he was about to chair a board meeting, I picked up my spoon and I smiled. Because I already knew what was coming, and I was ready. I should explain my sister before I explain anything else, because without understanding Kayla, none of this makes any sense. Kayla is 28 years old. She is beautiful in the effortless way that some people are: thick, dark hair, wide brown eyes, the kind of smile that makes strangers hold doors open for her without being asked. She has never held a job for more than 7 months. Not because she's incapable. She has a communications degree from a perfectly good state school that my parents paid for entirely. She is incapable of being bored, which is a different problem. She has been, in the 11 years since high school, a social media manager, a personal stylist, a Pilates instructor in training, a real estate agent for approximately 1 listing, a wedding planner's assistant, a dog walker, a candle maker, and most recently, a brand consultant, which, as far as I could tell, meant she posted aesthetic photos on Instagram and charged small businesses $200 for advice she pulled from YouTube tutorials. I am, by contrast, a senior financial analyst at a mid-size asset management firm in Phoenix. I have worked at the same company for 6 years. I have a 401k, a savings account with an actual balance, and a 1-bedroom condo I bought myself 22 months ago, after 2 years of deliberate, disciplined saving. I drive a 5-year-old Honda that I own outright. In my family, these facts have never been interpreted as evidence of hard work. They are interpreted as evidence that I have more than enough, and therefore can afford to share. I have been sharing since I was 19. $100 here when Kayla's rent was short. A co-payment for the car repair she swore she'd pay back. The security deposit loan that became a gift by the time she moved out. The groceries I bought just this once that became a quiet, recurring arrangement for almost a year. I have never totaled the number. I'm afraid of what it would be. My parents are not bad people. I want to say that clearly, because this story is easier to understand if you think they are, and I don't believe it's true. My father worked 30 years in facilities management. My mother taught elementary school. They retired with modest pensions and the paid-off house I was sitting in. They are good people who made one catastrophic parenting error. They decided, when Kayla was very young and very charming, that her happiness was fragile and required constant protection. And they appointed me, the older one, the steady one, as part of the protection infrastructure. I didn't agree to that role. It was assigned. My father cleared his throat. My mother adjusted the napkin in her lap. Kayla was sitting across from me, scrolling through her phone with the focused intensity she reserved for things she actually cared about, which was mostly her own content metrics. So, my father began, you know Kayla has been working really hard on building her business. I know she's been posting 3 times a week and calling it a business. I thought. I said. And the thing is, my mother continued, picking up the relay baton seamlessly, they had clearly rehearsed this. The thing is, renting is just throwing money away. Kayla needs stability. She needs to build equity. You know that better than anyone, Claire. You're in finance. I looked at Kayla. She had set her phone face down on the table. She was watching me with an expression I recognized from childhood, a careful, practiced blankness that she deployed when she wanted something and didn't want to seem like she wanted it. She found a place, my father said. A condo. Nice area, good price. 2 bedrooms. How much? I asked. 280,000, my mother said. Which is very reasonable for the market right now. It is, I agreed. Because it was. The issue, my father said, is the bank. Her income history is a little. He paused, searching for the word inconsistent. She hasn't been at her current work long enough to qualify on her own. I set my spoon down. I looked at my father. I looked at my mother. I looked at Kayla, who had now found a spot on the tablecloth that required her complete attention. You want me to co-sign? I said. Just as a formality, my mother said quickly. You wouldn't actually be responsible for anything. It's just so the bank feels more comfortable. You wouldn't even notice it. There it was. The same sentence, in different configurations, that I had been hearing my entire adult life. You won't even notice it. It's just a formality. It's not a big deal for you. As though my financial stability were a geographical feature, a mountain that couldn't feel the weight of people climbing it. Co-signing a $280,000 mortgage was not a formality. If Kayla defaulted, I would be on the hook for the entire balance. My credit score, which I had spent years carefully building, would crater. My ability to refinance my own condo, to buy a larger place someday, to take out a car loan or a business loan, all of it would be at the mercy of my sister's consistency, which had a documented average lifespan of 7 months. When do they need an answer? I asked. The sellers have another offer, Kayla said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was carefully neutral. So kind of soon. Like this week. Of course. The urgency. The sellers have another offer. The window is closing. Apply pressure, limit thinking time, extract the yes before the consequences become real. Let me look at the paperwork, I said. I want to understand what I'd be signing. My mother's shoulders relaxed. She heard that as agreement. My father nodded with the relieved satisfaction of a man whose part was done. Kayla picked up her phone again. I finished my soup. I helped clear the table. I hugged my mother goodbye and told my father the yard looked nice. I drove out of the neighborhood, turned left at the gas station on the corner, and pulled into the parking lot of a grocery store 2 blocks away. Then I opened the folder on the passenger seat. I had discovered the fraudulent credit card account 23 days ago, on a Tuesday evening when I was going through my mail. I'm meticulous about my mail, because I work in finance, and identity theft is something I genuinely understand in a way most people don't. The card was from a bank I'd never used, the account had been open for 4 months, and the billing address was listed as my condo, but with a slightly altered apartment number, the kind of change designed to pass automated address verification, while redirecting physical mail. I didn't panic. I worked in a world of numbers and discrepancies. I treated it the way I'd treat an error in a client's portfolio. Identify the scope, document everything, determine the exposure, then act. I called the bank's fraud department the same night. I did not close the account yet, because I wanted to understand how it had been opened. I requested a full transaction history and copies of the original application documents. They arrived by secure email within 48 hours. The application had been filed online. The social security number was mine. The date of birth was mine. The mother's maiden name, the security question, was mine. The email address used was a variation of my name I'd never created. But the most clarifying detail was the delivery address for the physical card, Kayla's apartment. I sat with that for a long moment. Then I thought about the gym membership charge. $300 a month for 4 months. I knew of exactly one gym that charged that rate, the boutique fitness studio 2 blocks from Kayla's apartment that she had mentioned wanting to join last spring. I thought about the resort in Scottsdale. I thought about the designer handbag. I thought about the first-class flights, and I pulled up Kayla's Instagram, and I found, posted 8 weeks ago, a photo of her at a resort pool with the caption, "Recharging. Sometimes you have to invest in yourself." She was wearing sunglasses I didn't recognize. Behind her was the unmistakable tiled logo of the Scottsdale Resort. She had 4,200 followers. The post had 218 likes. I didn't call her. I didn't call my parents. I made myself a cup of tea, sat at my kitchen table, and began building the file. Over the next 3 weeks, I was thorough. I pulled my full credit report from all 3 bureaus. The fraudulent card was the only new account, but in reviewing the inquiry history, I found something else, a hard inquiry from a different bank. 18 months ago, for an account that had been opened and then closed after 6 months. The address on that account led me to an apartment Kayla had lived in before her current one. She'd apparently had a card in my name at that address too, run it up to $4,000, then closed it before I ever noticed. 2 accounts, $15,000, give or take, and a sister who was now sitting at my parents' table asking me to put my name on a $280,000 mortgage. The audacity was genuinely architectural. It had load-bearing walls. I called my friend Marcus, who does forensic accounting for a litigation firm, and asked him to walk me through my options without disclosing any details about who was involved. He explained them clearly. I took notes. I thanked him. Then I sat in my car in that grocery store parking lot, 3 weeks later, with my folder, and I did something I have never done in my life. I decided not to be in a hurry. I would let it breathe. I would wait for the right moment. I had the documents. I had the transaction records. I had screenshots of every Instagram post that corresponded to a charge on the fraudulent accounts. I had a timeline. I was ready. But the when and the where those mattered. In finance, we call it timing the market. I was timing mine. I texted my mother that evening. Soup was amazing. Going to review the paperwork this week. Love you. She sent back 3 heart emojis. 2 days later, my father called. I need to talk to you about something else, he said, which is a sentence that has never once preceded good news. He told me that he and my mother had lent Kayla $8,000 6 months ago. He explained it calmly, the way you explain a minor administrative mistake. He said they had told Kayla that the loan was from both of them, and me that I had agreed to contribute my half. He said Kayla had recently reminded them that I hadn't paid my portion yet, and could I transfer $4,000 to them so they could balance the books. I held the phone away from my face for a moment. Kayla had borrowed $8,000 from our parents by telling them I was splitting the cost. Our parents had believed her and handed over the money. She had then, apparently, spent 6 months waiting to see if I would magically produce my non-existent half. And when I didn't, she had looped back to collect. It was its own kind of artistry. I genuinely almost admired it. I never agreed to that, I said to my father, as evenly as I could manage. There was a pause. Kayla said you did. She said you talked about it in March. In March, I was in Denver for a client conference for 11 days. I barely talked to anyone. Another pause. Longer. She said you texted. I can pull up every text I sent in March, Dad. I'm happy to do that. I never agreed to split any loan with her. My father made a sound I had never heard from him before, a low, grinding exhale, like something in him was recalibrating. I'll talk to her, he said finally. He did not call me back. My mother called 2 days later to tell me that there had been a misunderstanding, that Kayla had perhaps remembered the conversation wrong, and that it was all sorted out. I did not ask what sorted out meant. I thanked her and told her I was almost done reviewing the mortgage paperwork. Oh, good, my mother said, relief flooding her voice. The sellers are getting impatient. The sellers. I had stopped believing there were sellers 3 days ago. Thanksgiving was at my aunt and uncle's house that year, which meant 40 minutes of highway driving, and approximately 35 relatives crowded into a colonial that my aunt referred to as cozy, in the same way my mother referred to ambushes. It was a real family gathering cousins I genuinely liked. My uncle's famous sweet potato casserole, children running between the legs of adults, who were pretending not to know that the children were running between their legs. The kind of Thanksgiving that is actually enjoyable until it isn't. Kayla arrived 20 minutes after I did, in an outfit that cost more than my car payment, carrying a bottle of wine she had definitely not paid for with her own money. My parents arrived 5 minutes after that. My mother hugged everyone within arm's reach. My father found the football game normal for approximately 90 minutes. I had chosen Thanksgiving deliberately, not to ruin it. I want to be clear about that. I had chosen it because it was the natural deadline. The mortgage paperwork had to be returned by the end of the week. My parents would expect an answer. Kayla would expect an answer, and I needed them all in one place when I gave it. I had also chosen it because my Aunt Renee, who is my father's older sister and the family's unofficial historian and moral authority, would be there. Renee has a doctorate in education and a tolerance for nonsense that begins and ends at 0. I love her for it. After dinner, during the loose drifting hour when people are waiting for pie and talking about nothing, I found my father in the hallway near the coat closet, refilling his sparkling water. "I've made a decision about the mortgage," I said quietly. He turned. His face was hopeful in a way that made me sad for him, because he was a good man who had simply loved the wrong child more. "I'm not going to co-sign," I said. "But before I explain why, I need to show you and Mom something. Can you get her? I'd like Kayla to be there too." Something in my voice must have registered, because he didn't argue. He went and got them. Kayla came last, holding her wine glass, already wearing the expression of someone who expected to be annoyed. We drifted, the 4 of us, to my aunt's study at the back of the house, a small room lined with bookshelves and smelling of old paper. I closed the door. My aunt's house was loud enough that no one would notice. I set my bag on the desk chair and took out the folder. 3 weeks ago, I said, I received a credit card statement for an account I never opened. The balance was $11,400. My mother frowned. "Oh, Claire, that's awful. Identity theft is so..." "The card was delivered to Kayla's apartment," I said. The room went very quiet. I opened the folder and laid the first document on the desk, the bank's account application, with the billing address and the delivery address highlighted. I watched my parents' eyes move to Kayla. I watched Kayla's jaw tighten. "That's," she started. "I also found a second account," I said. "Opened 18 months ago, closed after 6 months. $4,000 in charges, all while you were living on Ridgemont. That one I might never have noticed if I hadn't pulled a full credit report." I laid that document next to the first one. "Kayla." My father's voice was very low. The single word carried 30 years of parental authority, and something else underneath it, something cracking. "She's exaggerating," Kayla said, and her voice had gone sharp, defensive. "I was going to pay it back. I was in a rough patch. The first one I completely forgot about. It was barely anything. Barely anything," I repeated. "It was $4,000 the first time and $11,000 the second time. I was going to pay it back," she said again. "When the business takes off, I have projections." "You opened a credit card in my name," I said, hearing my own voice, as if from a slight distance, very calm, very clear. "You committed identity fraud, Kayla. That's a federal offense. I want you to understand that clearly, because I need you to understand what I chose not to do." My mother made a sound. My father pressed his hand flat against the bookshelf beside him, as though he needed the support. "I contacted the bank's fraud department," I continued. "I have the right to file a police report. The account is documented. The transaction history is documented. The fact that the physical card was delivered to your address is documented. The Instagram posts that correspond to the charges are printed and time-stamped." I paused. "The Scottsdale resort photo. The handbag. The first-class seat you posted a story from that I assumed was a friend's account." Kayla's face had gone through several colors. It had settled somewhere between white and gray. "I didn't report it," I said, "because I wanted to understand the full picture first. And then Mom and Dad asked me to co-sign a $280,000 mortgage." My father turned to look at Kayla with an expression I had never seen on his face. It was not anger yet. It was the expression before anger, the moment of realization that something you believed was not real. "The sellers with the competing offer," I said. "Is there actually a condo, or was this a setup to get my name on a loan application to cover the rest of the debt?" "There's a condo," Kayla said, her voice thin. "I really did find a place." "Okay," I said. "Then you'll understand why I won't be co-signing. given that I'm currently in the process of disputing $15,000 of fraudulent charges made in my name by the person who would be living there. You're being so dramatic, Kayla said. And I watched her try to locate the tone that had always worked on me, the breezy dismissal, the implication that I was oversensitive, overwrought, too rigid to understand how the real world worked. This is such a Claire thing to do, making everything into a production. The production was opening credit cards in my name, I said. I'm just describing what you did. Kayla. My mother's voice was almost inaudible. Is this true? Kayla turned to her, and I watched her make the calculation, whether to keep denying it, whether to cry, whether to bargain. I had watched her make that calculation my whole life. She always chose based on what would work fastest. I was going to pay her back, she said, and her eyes filled with tears. I just needed a bridge. I've been trying so hard, Mom. You know how hard I've been trying. The business is almost there. It's right there. And I just needed. You used my social security number, I said. You used my mother's maiden name as a security answer. You had a card delivered to your apartment. That is not a bridge. That is a choice, made deliberately, multiple times. She's right. My father's voice came out strange and compressed, like it was being squeezed through something. He wasn't looking at any of us. He was looking at the wall. She's right, Linda. My mother sat down heavily in my aunt's reading chair. She looked suddenly very small. She looked like someone who had been holding a very heavy thing for a very long time and had just been told she could set it down, except setting it down hurt. The loan, my father said. The $8,000. Did you ever say Claire agreed to half? Kayla wiped her eyes. The tears were real, I think. Not because she was sorry for what she'd done, but because it was over. That particular flavor of tears I recognized. She'd cried them before, at the end of other things. I thought she would, Kayla said quietly. If you told her you needed it, I thought she would. She always does. The honesty of that sentence was almost refreshing. I looked at my parents. My father had aged, visibly, in the last 4 minutes. My mother was holding her own hands in her lap. They were good people who had spent 30 years protecting a child from the weight of her own choices, and in doing so, had never let her build the muscle to carry anything at all. I'm not filing a police report, I said. I'm not doing that to you, or to myself, or to whatever is left of this family. But I am disputing both accounts fully with the banks, and any attempt to challenge that dispute will result in a report being filed. The banks have all the documentation they need. Kayla nodded. She was looking at the floor. I also want it acknowledged by both of you. I looked at my parents, that I have not agreed to contribute to any loan, ever. In any conversation, that $4,000 Dad was asked to collect from me does not exist. Of course, my mother whispered. Of course, sweetheart. We're so sorry. We didn't know. I know you didn't, I said. And I meant it. I picked up my folder. I straightened the papers. I put it back in my bag. Then I opened the study door and walked back into the noise of Thanksgiving, the cousins, the football game, my uncle carving a second round off the turkey, children shrieking about something involving a dog and a dinner roll. I found my Aunt Renee at the kitchen island, cutting pie with the efficiency of someone who had been feeding large groups of people for 50 years. Slice? She asked without looking up. Please, I said. She slid a generous piece of pecan pie onto a plate and handed it to me. She looked at my face at whatever was arranged there, and she said nothing, which is the most valuable thing a person can offer in that moment. I stood at the kitchen island and ate my pie and listened to my family move around me, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Not happiness exactly. More like the absence of weight. A specific lightness that comes not from things getting better, but from a secret no longer requiring any energy to keep. The drive home was 40 minutes of empty highway, and a playlist I'd made for long runs, and when I unlocked my condo door and stepped into the silence of my own space, I stood in the entryway for a moment, just breathing it in. My condo is small. 1 bedroom, a kitchen with just enough counter space, a living room where I've spent years reading and cooking, and occasionally watching television alone. I bought it myself. I furnished it slowly, one piece at a time, choosing things I actually liked rather than things that were convenient or on sale. There is a print above the couch that I picked up at a street market in Chicago on a work trip. There is a plant on the windowsill that has survived 2 years because I remember to water it. It is entirely, completely mine. I made a cup of tea and sat on the couch. The fraudulent accounts were in the process of being disputed. By Monday, my credit file would show them as removed. The damage, the bank had told me, would be fully cleared within 30 days. My sister called twice while I was driving home. I let both calls go to voicemail. She would need time to sit with the fact that she had been seen clearly, maybe for the first time. I didn't know what would come from that. I didn't know if she would change, if the fear of real consequences would finally build the thing in her that 28 years of cushioning had prevented. I hoped it would. I chose to hope, because the alternative certainty that people don't change is too exhausting to carry through a life. My mother texted at 10:30, "We need to talk soon. I'm so ashamed. I love you so much." I read it twice. I set the phone face down on the coffee table. My father sent nothing, which was its own kind of communication. He was processing. He was a man who had believed he was protecting his family and had discovered that protection, badly aimed, had become the danger. That would take more than one night. I had a consultation with a therapist in 2 weeks. I'd made the appointment 3 months ago, before any of this, because I had begun to notice that I was exhausted in a way that sleep didn't fix, and that I spent a significant portion of my working hours managing dread about my personal life. I would have a great deal to talk about. I was, oddly, looking forward to it. The next morning, I woke up without an alarm. It was the first Sunday in as long as I could remember that I had not woken up calculating what was being asked of me and whether I could afford to give it. I made coffee. I opened the window. The November air was thin and cold and smelled like nothing in particular, which is the smell of a morning that belongs entirely to you. I sat at my kitchen table with both hands around the mug and thought about what my father had said a long time ago, when I was maybe 12 years old and had spent a Saturday helping my mother clean the garage. "You're our rock, Claire. You know that? You're the one we can always count on." He said it with such pride. He meant it as the highest compliment. And I had carried being the rock through every inconvenient Sunday, every secret loan, every redirected bill, every phone call that started with, "We have some news." I had carried it until it was not a compliment anymore, but a load-bearing description, a job title I had never applied for. You can put down a rock. That, I was learning, is the revolutionary discovery no one tells you about. That the things you were handed as identity, the responsible one, the stable one, the one we can count on, are not your bones. They are not structural. You can set them on the table and look at them and decide, with intention, what you actually want to pick back up. I picked up my coffee. I watched the light change on the kitchen wall as the sun came up behind the building across the street. My phone was quiet. The folder was in my bag by the door. Thanksgiving was yesterday. I had nowhere I had to be. I took a sip. It was hot and strong, and I had made it exactly the way I liked it, without asking anyone's preference, without accommodating a single need but my own. It tasted like the beginning of something. I wasn't sure yet what. But for the first time in a very long time, I was curious to find out. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what comes next, and drop a comment and let us know, where in the world are you watching from today?